My name is Claire Thompson. I am 39 years old, and I live in a quiet town just outside Asheville, North Carolina. From the outside, my life once looked like something people admired without question. A warm wooden house tucked among tall pine trees, a polite and thoughtful son, and a husband with a respectable career in international logistics. To strangers, it looked peaceful, even enviable. But that picture was painted over years of endurance, layered again and again with the same quiet promise I whispered to myself. It will get better. I repeated that for 15 years. My husband, Richard, is 42. He works for a global shipping company, a job that slowly pulled him further and further away from home. When our son Nathan was 5, Richard began taking extended business trips. At first, it was a few weeks at a time, then months. Eventually, his presence in our home became rare, limited to Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the anniversary of his mother's death. I never blamed him for the work itself. I understood pressure, responsibility, the weight of providing. What I didn't expect was how absence could turn into habit, and how silence could replace connection so completely that one day you realize you no longer know how to speak to the person you married. After Nathan was born, I gave up my career in interior design. It was a mutual decision, or at least it felt that way then. We agreed I would stay home and raise him, and I did it fully. Every meal, every school meeting, every late-night fever and scraped knee was mine to handle. In those early years, Richard used to tell me how grateful he was. He called me amazing. He said he was lucky. Somewhere along the way, those words disappeared. They were replaced with short messages sent from airports and hotel rooms. In a meeting, can't talk now, don't call. 2 years ago, I went back to work. Not because we needed the money, but because I felt like I was slowly disappearing. I began teaching floral design classes at a small community center 10 minutes from our house. Just a few classes each week, but it reminded me that I was more than someone waiting. Around that time, I started writing. At first, it was private. Journal entries, anonymous posts on a small blog. Then a character took shape. A woman quietly resisting lies no one thought could be uncovered. I wrote under the name L.C. Monroe. No one knew it was me, not Richard, not even Nathan. When my first novel gained over 100,000 followers on a writing forum, I still told no one. I thought it belonged to me alone. Nathan is 16 now. He's observant in a way that feels far older than his years. He doesn't ask much about his father, but I know he notices everything. Once I caught him standing in front of our wedding photo, staring at it for a long time. When I asked what he was thinking, he shrugged and said it was strange how his dad was never around, but somehow still in every picture. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain something I barely understood myself. Whenever Richard came home, it felt rehearsed. Gifts appeared, polite questions were asked. He stayed for a few meals, slept in our bed like a visitor, and then left again with promises of more time soon. And I nodded along, like someone afraid to disturb fragile glass. Our marriage wasn't fiery or violent. It was worse than that. It was dull, like water left sitting too long, clear but lifeless. Still, I stayed. For Nathan, for the idea of family. I believed that if love existed at all, people eventually came back. That belief ended one April afternoon. Richard called on video for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. I smiled when his face appeared, but he didn't return it. He spoke 5 words, his voice steady and distant. "Claire, we should get divorced." For a moment, it felt unreal, like dialogue from a story I hadn't finished writing. Then the call ended. No explanation, no pause, just emptiness spreading slowly through my chest. 3 days later, an express envelope arrived. His name was typed neatly in the corner, sent from an office in Chicago. Inside were divorce papers, financial terms highlighted in yellow, and a handwritten note thanking me for everything. He wrote that we both deserved a new life and asked me to prepare to move before fall. I stood by the window holding that note, my hands shaking. Move. He actually wrote the word. When I called him, he answered after a few rings. He said he didn't want things to get messy. He said we had lived apart too long to call it a marriage. He said he would support Nathan until he turned 18 and cover moving costs if needed. When I laughed, it sounded hollow even to my own ears. 18, 3 more years. That was all he saw. He told me the house belonged to his family, that it was never legally mine. That sentence cut deeper than anything else. After all those years, I was still temporary. That night, I said nothing to Nathan. I cooked dinner like always, asked about school, smiled where it was expected. But inside, something had shifted. 3 days later, I told Richard I wasn't signing. I said if he wanted my signature, we would renegotiate. I demanded written commitment to support Nathan through college. He said he had no legal obligation. I told him he had a moral one. When he ended the call, I knew I'd crossed a line he didn't expect me to cross. Texts followed, threats dressed as warnings. If I kept delaying, he wouldn't pay anything. I replied once and only once. Then I'll see you in court. After that, I went quiet. I read the documents again and again, noticing everything that was missing. No acknowledgement of what I gave up, no recognition of 15 years of unpaid labor, caregiving, and sacrifice. Richard wanted the divorce finished before August. He claimed it was for work, for convenience. But the urgency didn't match the man I knew, the man who avoided conflict at all costs. Something felt wrong. One night, after Nathan went to bed, I checked Richard's old emails. The IP addresses didn't match Chicago. They traced back to a small town called Peoria. I hired a private investigator online. Nothing dramatic, just a woman named Linda who specialized in divorce cases. I gave her the information I had. She asked for 3 days. On the 4th day, she sent me a photo. Richard stood in front of a modest suburban house holding groceries. Next to him was a young blonde woman and a little boy holding a melting popsicle, looking up at Richard like he was his father. Behind them was a pickup truck Richard claimed he had sold. My body went cold, not because he cheated, but because he had built another life while still calling me his wife. Linda confirmed everything. The house belonged to Jenna Malone. The boy was Liam, no father listed. Richard had rented a separate apartment nearby as a cover. 2 lives, one hidden, one erased. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I wrote. I sent Richard an email with 2 photos attached and one clear message. If you want my signature, be prepared to cover Nathan's full college tuition, legal fees, and moving costs. Otherwise, I will present everything in court. His reply came quickly. He said he could explain. I told him I was done with half-truths. When I named the boy, the line went silent. 3 hours later, he emailed again. He said he would come by that weekend. When I read it, I knew the waiting was over. Richard showed up as promised. On a hot Sunday afternoon, he stood in the doorway, face blank, acting as if he still belonged there. He asked if I was ready to sign the papers. I looked straight at him and asked if he was in such a rush because the child needed to enroll in school. His expression cracked. He didn't deny it.
He didn't explain. He turned instead to the shelf at our 2004 wedding photo. Claire, I don't want to make this difficult. Just sign and I'll leave enough assets for you and Nathan to live comfortably. Thanks, but I don't need you to leave behind anything. I just want the truth to stand in the right place. I pulled a stack of documents from the drawer and placed them on the oak coffee table. Richard stared at it like it was a ticking bomb. What is that? Legal documents, including an updated deed to this house, a preliminary will from Harold Thompson, your father, and an adoption certificate. Adoption? Richard stepped back. I continued calmly. Last year, after your father had his second stroke, I was the one who took him to therapy every week. You didn't even answer his calls once during those 3 months. Richard's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. During that time, he rewrote his will, fearing you'd try to manipulate things after his death. He had me legally adopted. This house is now under my name, granted as a living gift per his estate planning terms. I slid a certified copy in front of him. Richard grabbed it, eyes scanning each line, a vein twitching on his forehead. This is forged. Feel free to take it to court. His attorney has verified everything, and I have the notarized original. If needed, the court can contact him. He's still sharp and ready to testify. Richard dropped onto the couch like the air had been sucked from his lungs. I didn't stop. As for the inheritance, after you announced the divorce, your father filed a formal petition to revoke your inheritance rights. Under North Carolina law, if approved, the remaining estate will pass directly to Nathan, his biological grandson, under intestate succession. He can't do that. He can, and he already did. His reason? My only son knowingly had a child born out of wedlock, lived a double life, and discarded his original family like worn-out furniture. I made sure to say each word slowly, clearly, like hammering away at the false reality Richard had built for years. He bowed his head, hands clasped, chest rising unevenly. A moment later, he looked up, voice, "So what now? You're kicking me out?" "No, I'm letting you walk out once you realize there's not a single brick left under your feet." I stood and walked toward the door. This house belongs to me and Nathan. We're not going anywhere. You better find a new apartment for your child before the school year starts. Richard rose slowly, not a word, just as his hand touched the doorknob. I spoke again. "Oh, and one more thing. If you plan on avoiding child support for Nathan, don't worry, I'll bring all of this to the family court, and if necessary, I'll make it public. Every detail, including how you maintained dual residences during work trips." He froze, turned around, eyes wide. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." A calm expression crossed my face, not out of spite, but from the quiet power of knowing I could finally protect myself. Richard left that day, and I knew the board had turned. 3 weeks after Richard moved out, a message from Harper Literary, one of the biggest publishing houses on the East Coast, landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "Congratulations, we are officially acquiring the adaptation rights to Ash Tree Letters for an animated series set for global release next spring." No one knew C.L. Monroe was me. For 3 years, I had quietly uploaded chapters to an international writing platform, read every line of feedback, edited in silence, and grew alone. I never told Richard. I knew he'd dismiss it as a time-wasting hobby, but now that waste of time earned a 6-figure licensing deal. More importantly, it brought recognition, confidence, and the proof that I was never the dependent one they imagined. On contract signing day, I brought Nathan with me. My son wore a crisp white shirt, hair neatly styled, his eyes glowing with pride. After leaving Harper's headquarters, we stopped at a little diner near the central station for dinner. As the main course was served, Nathan looked at me for a long moment and asked, "Are you going to tell Dad?" I set my glass down, paused. "Not yet, but I think it's time." The opportunity came sooner than I thought. A week later, Richard called, the first time in over a month. His voice was no longer sharp, just low, uncertain. "Claire, I heard about Dad. Nathan spoke with him. I didn't expect things to go this far. You should have called him sooner, not for the house, but because you're his son. But it's too late now." Silence. Then he spoke again, like he was trying to reach for something long gone. "Claire, I know I messed up, but I also know you're not just someone who stays in the kitchen like I used to think. You've always had something more. I see it in Nathan's eyes, how proud of you." I let out a soft laugh. "I've always been me. You just never looked closely enough." I paused, then said firmly, "I'm C.L. Monroe." Beat of silence, then from the other end, "What?" the author of Ash Tree Letters, the one you asked Nathan about the other day, who writes women that ridiculous. Claire, no way. Why not? Because I was your wife for 15 years, and in your eyes I was just a housewife who cooked, cleaned, and fulfilled her role. I stopped. My tone was calm but steady. I've spent the last 2 years studying family law, property rights, and civil law, not to fight anyone, but to fully understand what I have the right to protect. You studied for this? For the first time, Richard's voice actually shook. I studied so I wouldn't be a victim the day betrayal came. The divorce papers are signed, all financial terms are finalized, the assets are certified, and the entire income from the upcoming adaptations has nothing to do with you. I cut him off. If you're calling to claim a share, don't. If you're calling to apologize, I acknowledge it. But if you're calling to come back, it's too late. Silence on the other end. I said softly, some things don't break from impact. They fall apart because they've been neglected for too long. That night, while Nathan was rereading the draft of my next novel, he said, "You know what? Dad told me you're a dangerous woman because you stay quiet and still leave people with no way out." I held his gaze steady and calm. If that's what your father thinks, then there's no need to correct him. From that moment on, I stopped fearing abandonment. I had learned how to stand on my own through knowledge, calm strength, and the very chapters I wrote with my own hands. 2 months after Richard stepped away from our last call, I received a strange email from an address ending in gtrlogistics.com, his workplace for over a decade. It was from Marcia Fuller, the regional HR director. The message was brief and cold. We confirmed that Mr. Richard Thompson has been officially transferred to the branch office in Rapid City, South Dakota, with a downgraded role to Tier 3. If there are any ongoing legal matters between you and Mr. Thompson, please submit all documentation to our legal department for processing under labor compliance. I wasn't surprised. I just didn't expect things to move that fast. Through a few contacts I still had, including a former colleague of Richard's who kept in touch because she admired Mrs. Monroe's novels, I learned what had happened. After Richard pushed me to sign the divorce papers and failed, Jenna, his mistress, called his office herself, asking to verify paperwork for residency sponsorship for her and her son. That call was recorded. A few days later, an internal report was filed. Richard was cited for violating the company's ethics policy, using business travel to maintain a double life, and using his corporate housing to conceal an undeclared personal relationship. There was no termination, but the demotion, relocation, and loss of all privileges were enough to permanently erase a rising candidate from senior management's radar. I heard Jenna couldn't handle the harsher pace of life in that small city. Her son Liam frequently missed school due to trouble adjusting to the new environment. According to a post she quietly shared in a single-mother parenting group, Richard, once the confident man in a dark suit and Swiss watch, was now a temporary logistics analyst working in a windless room sharing a parking lot with 7 other employees. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel sorry either. One late autumn afternoon, I received a package by express mail, no sender name. Inside was an envelope containing a bank check for $85,000 and a handwritten note that read in stiff print, "Alimony. Don't contact me again." I laughed. A man who once thought he was clever enough to outsmart family, the law, and ethics now had to pay to be forgotten. But the scariest thing isn't losing money, it's losing trust. I used that money to do the only thing I believed was right. I founded a scholarship named after my former mother-in-law, Evelyn Thompson, the woman who once called me the daughter I always wished I had. The scholarship is for high school girls in the state who want to study literature, education, or law, the 3 things that saved me from years of living like a shadow. As for Jenna, word has it that after growing increasingly frustrated with Richard, she started live streaming craft sales online, occasionally venting about men who say they love you but never take responsibility. When a viewer commented, "Are you sure you chose the right man?" she immediately blocked them. I have no opinion. Everyone lives with the consequences of their choices, and Jenna chose a man who once abandoned his family without hesitation. That alone says enough. Nathan is now a first-year communications major. My son has never asked about what happened between me and his father, but on his 17th birthday, when I handed him a signed copy of my book from the publisher, he simply said, "Thanks, Mom, for not giving up." Life never goes back to what it was, but it can begin a new version if you're brave enough to end the old one properly. I'm no longer the Claire who lived in waiting. I'm a mother, a writer, and the only person who gets to define who I am. 1 year after signing the divorce papers, I stood on the 3rd-floor balcony of a historic building in Asheville's Arts District, holding a warm cup of coffee, watching people bustle below through the fiery colors of fall. This apartment isn't much bigger than our old house, but it breathes freedom. No more cold suitcases showing up on holidays, no more silent meals heavy with unspoken things, just me, Nathan, and our own space, where everything is real, nothing is hidden or forced. After the Ash Tree Letters anime series premiered, feedback from both the US and Japan exceeded expectations. International translation rights were quickly purchased. The main character, a woman who quietly turned her life around, became a symbol shared by thousands of readers across online forums. I never appeared publicly. No press conferences, no book signings. Every interview was written through a representative. I kept the pen name C.L. Monroe as a way to separate my career from my private life, and to let Claire Thompson live fully, without spotlights or judgment. With steady income from licensing and adaptation deals, I no longer worry about end-of-month bills. But what fulfills me most is being able to write every day, not in secret, not waiting until everyone is asleep. Nathan is now a freshman in digital media at the University of North Carolina. He lives in the dorms and comes home only on weekends, but every time he walks in, he greets me with the biggest smile, hugs me for a long moment, and only then drops his backpack. Once I joked, "Life must be fun if you come home smiling like you just won the lottery." Nathan answered dryly, "It's because here I don't have to explain who I am." I didn't reply, but my heart, which once shrank from too many disappointments, has now learned to warm up in quiet, gentle ways. On a rainy night with wind rattling the window pane, I sat at my laptop and opened a blank document for a new project. This time, the main character is a 39-year-old woman living in a small town who loves her son, loves floral design, and was once deeply betrayed. But she doesn't fall. She stands up, learns to protect her son, her assets, and rewrites her life, one word at a time. I didn't name her right away. I let her walk, speak, breathe, and rediscover herself, just like I once did. Maybe this time I won't use a pen name. Maybe. Or maybe I still will, because I want the world to know only the story, not the woman behind it. One day I received an unmarked envelope. Inside was an old photo, me, Richard, and Nathan standing in front of our old house on some past Thanksgiving. On the back, a few shaky words were written. If I could do it again, I wish I'd been different. I folded the photo, placed it in the bottom drawer, and closed it. Not to forget, but to never repeat. Nathan and I continue to live in peace. No drama, no need to win, just the freedom to be ourselves and to see each other clearly without distortion. In the end, I realized freedom isn't about walking away, It's about having the courage to stay with yourself after everything else has fallen apart. My story isn't just about leaving a broken marriage, it's about returning to who I truly am. I was once dismissed as just a stay-at-home mom, overlooked, betrayed, but I didn't fall. I stood up, learned to protect my son, my assets, and rewrote my life, one word at a time. Today, I live freely, happily, and strong enough to not need anyone else to define my worth, and I believe anyone can do the same. What do you think about Claire's choices and the ending Richard faced? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about life, family, and resilience.